Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Cisca, and in today's video I'll be showing you how to make a tube bustier, and I'll also be using a bra cup for this tutorial. This is actually my first time using a bra cup to make any type of bustier, and this actually turned out pretty great, as you can see. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Please click the subscribe button and click the bell so you get notifications whenever I post new videos. And now we can get right into the tutorial. So guys, here is the pattern I drafted in my previous video, and this is what we're going to be using to make the tube top. Now you have two options. You can use the tube pattern like this, but the difference is that if you use it like this, a little under your underarm will kind of show. So it's not like going to, go really up at your underarm. If you don't want that, the other thing you can do, which is the second option, is to go up from your back to your side seam at the front by ½ inch or 1 inch. Do we understand? That will kind of like help your tube top to slightly go up into your armpit area without exposing much skin at that point. So that's up to you. You can go up by 1 inch or ½ inch. So if you want to do that, this is how you will do it. Let me just quickly show you before we go into the sewing tutorial. So I come here at my center back, I mark 1 inch upwards. So can you see what I'm doing? I come here at the dart area, mark 1 inch upward. So you have to do it separately for each of them. So I mark 1 inch upwards, come right here to the other part of the back, the second dart area, mark 1 inch upwards, come to the side seam of the back, mark 1 inch upwards, come to the side seam of the front, mark 1 inch upwards. So can you see what I've done now? The next thing I'm going to do is to just connect the top like this for this first part of the back that has the zipper allowance. Connect it, following the curve at the bottom. For this second part, you want to do it for this and this. Now for this part of the side seam that is for the front, what you want to do is to just do a slight curve that links up to this curve here. You're not going 1 inch all the way to the top. No, this is how you are going to do it. So can you see? So this will sort of like increase the height of the tube top going into your armhole. Once you do this now, you can go ahead and cut this out, and this would be your new pattern. You are not doing anything to this part because it is connected to the center front, and we're not touching the top right here. For my own tube top, I did not do this increment or this rising up towards the armhole area. I did it so that if this is an option for you, you can go ahead and do that before cutting your pattern out on fabric. Do you understand? I've gone ahead to cut my fabric based on the pattern that we drafted in the previous video. If you've not seen that, I'll link it up in my description box, or you'll see an eye that will just pop up above, on top of the video. So guys, I've cut the front. Can you see? Right here is the front piece with a ½ inch seam allowance all around. This is the part that has the center front right here at the sides. I've gone ahead to cut it on lining as well, and then I fused both main fabric and lining with interfacing. So I've also cut the back, and this is what we have. I added ½ inch seam allowance all around, except the part that already has our zipper allowance. I did not add seam allowance to this side. I cut it on lining fabric as well, and I also went ahead to fuse with fusible interfacing. I placed the fabrics, the main fabric and the lining fabric, on top of each other with their corresponding parts with right sides touching. Can you see? I did the same thing for the front as well. So you want to do this right sides touching. Now if you don't want to add a bra cup to your bustier that you are making, you can go ahead and cut wadding for the bust area. I have a tutorial on how to do that to pad the bust area of princess seams. I will link that up in my description box. So after pinning them together, I'll take them to my sewing machine now and sew all the pieces that I have pinned down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'll be sewing the front separately like this, both main fabric and lining. I'll sew the back separately, main fabric and lining fabric, with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So guys, if you want to add a bra cup to your bustier, you need to know how to place it. And right here is a bra cup that I have in my size. It came in size 36. So right here I have the deeper part, and the top here is the shallow part. So the deep part of the bra cup is where, you know, your bust is going to sit. Now this is how you're going to place it. So can you see how I placed the bra cup? That here will go to your under bust, can you see? And then this part towards your center front, and then you have this side right here that will be, you know, for your side boob. So that is how you want to, you know, place it on your tube top or whatever you're making. Just go ahead and do the placement like this. So guys, I've sewn the pieces up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So here is the front. Can you see? And you can see that the bust area has come out really well. Here is my lining. I've sewn it up as well, and right here are the back pieces, both lining and main fabric. So what I'm going to do now is to prep this bra cup, because I'm not going to be sewing, you know, around this edge. This part is kind of, you know, flat. I don't know if you can see that. So right here is kind of flat. This place is the part that, you know, has the foamy part. And because I'm not going to be sewing on top of this part here, which is serving as seam allowance, what I'm going to do is to trim it off all around. So after trimming, this is what I have. What I'm going to do now is to go ahead and place the bra cup on top of my fabric. Now I've marked and notched where my under bust is. So what I'm going to do is to place this part here right at the under bust. So can you see what I'm doing? Your side boob is much more fuller than the center of your boob. So you want to, you know, make sure that more of this side of the deeper part moves towards your side boob. So sort of like this, and then this part would kind of like land at the center front. So what I'll be doing is using a needle and thread to tack this point here and right here. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Just make sure that it fits really well. I'll do the same thing for the other piece on this side as well. After tacking my bra cup to my fabric, this is what I have. I only tacked the side and the under bust area here. I didn't tack the center front, because if you do, your fabric will not have the opportunity to, you know, spread out when you wear it, especially at this point. So you want to not tack the bra cup to the center front area. There's going to be creasing going on right there. What I'm now going to do is to get my back piece now, place side seam to side seam of the front piece, and then I'll be stitching this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'll do the same thing for the other side as well. Stitch down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So what I'm doing here now, I'll just repeat the same thing for the lining fabric. The only difference is that there is not going to be bra cup on your lining. So I'll just join the back piece to the front at the side seam area with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So after sewing the sides down, this is what I have. I've also, like I said, sewn the sides for the lining fabric. In order for my bra cup to sort of like stay put, what I'll do is cut pieces of hemming tape, and then I'll just place it right under here. So I'll just place a couple of them right here. Then I would take this now and then use my pressing iron to press it down so that the bra cup will sort of like glue to my fabric. So I'll just go ahead and do that now. After pressing the hemming tape, the bra cup is a lot more stable now. So can you see? It's a lot more stable. So what I'm going to do next is to fix my zipper, and I'm going with an open and close zipper so that we'll be able to wear this bustier really well. So I'll just open this up. Unfortunately, I don't have a shorter zipper, so I'll just make do with this. After opening, your zipper should separate into two like this. So I'm just going to flip my tube top to the right side. I'm going to place the right side of my zipper to the right side of my tube top, making sure I place it a little more than half an inch away from the edge of my fabric, because we're going to be sewing this part with a half an inch seam allowance. And then I'll be sewing my zipper to the fabric with a half an inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to attach this side as well, right sides touching right sides of my zipper, placing it a little more than half an inch away from the edge of the fabric, and then I'll just pin this down. So what I'm going to do now is to go ahead and stitch this up with a half an inch seam allowance. So guys, I've sewn my zipper right here and right here. So I'm going to explain why we have it sewn like this instead of me sewing, totally with a half an inch seam allowance. For most of my dresses that I make, you will notice that I usually, go in by a half an inch when sewing my zipper. This is to, remove zip bulge at the back of my body, by the time I wear the dress. It actually helps with fitting. So while I was sewing this zipper on, I went with half an inch from the top, and you can see that I sort of like slanted till I got to my upper waistline. This right here is my lower waistline, but right here is my upper waistline, which is around 15.5. So I went half an inch like this, slanted till I got to that 1 inch. So can you see what I did? And then from that 1 inch, I started, reducing the allowance till, I sewed half an inch at this point. So that is what I did for both of them. And when I wore it, the fitting was actually perfect. I did not have any zip bulge. Another adjustment that I did was to, go in more at the side seam area by 1/4 of an inch to, ensure that the tube bustier is, fits around my bust area. So that is why I went in more by 1/4 of an inch here. So go ahead and test your tube top to check for fitting, to check if you can make any adjustments before you go on to sew your lining. That is what sewing like this gives you an opportunity to do. If you feel that the tube top is too high for you at this point, while sewing your main fabric to your lining fabric, you can go on to make that adjustment, increase your sewing allowance at the top like this, and then just sew straight down to this point. Just make sure that the side seam area is a half an inch. Do you understand? I'm going to take my tube top to my sewing machine and sew with my seam allowances. I'll be sewing this part with a half an inch. If I feel that I need to do any, shortening of my tube top, I'll just increase the seam allowance while I'm sewing at the center front area. So like this, come right here, sew with a half an inch seam allowance. Then I'll be sewing the bottom all the way with a half an inch seam allowance. And while sewing, please ensure that your seams are spread open. I have sewn the lining to the main fabric. I went ahead to, add an extra seam allowance of 0.25 inches just to take in more fabric at the top. And after doing that, I did a top stitch. Doing a top stitch would help your bustier to, balance well. I did a top stitch at the top. I did a top stitch at the bottom as well. And in order to do that top stitch, what I did was to fold my seam allowance towards my lining fabric, and then I stitched, right on top there towards the seam allowance. So if you sew this way, on the right side, the stitch would show on the lining, not on your main fabric. So what you want to do is push your seam allowance towards your lining and then stitch after your original seam, just about 1/8 of an inch. And this is what I have. So guys, instead of me, sealing up the zipper allowance area and then turning in my fabric through one of the side seam, I'm going to turn everything through one of the zipper area, and this is because of the size of the bra cup. Is actually, I feel it's too big to actually go through this seam allowance place. So I'm going to pull everything out to the right side, following this part here. So I'll just go ahead and do that. So after turning it right side out, this is what I have. Please make sure that before you go ahead and do the top stitching that I mentioned earlier, try to notch your fabric around cuff points. It will actually help you to, sew the top stitch very, very easily. So that is what I did around the top of my bust. And now that we have turned it over, what I'm going to do now is to trim off the zipper that we don't need. So I'll just trim this off right here. Come right here, trim it as well. And now, in order to enclose this part, what I'm going to do is to fold my fabric in like this. So can you see what I'm doing? I'll just fold everything in such that the zipper would show. I'll fold this part by the seam allowance, and then go on to top stitch my lining onto the zipper. So this is what I'm going to do to seal up the bustier tube top at this point here, as well as at this point here. So I'll just go ahead and sew this up. So guys, I'm done sewing the tube bustier at the zipper part area, and as you can see, I've zipped it up. This is what I have. What this needs now is to give it a press so that the fabric can, the fabric and the lining can rest really well. In order to, have this part at the top really stiff, you will notice it is quite flexible. In order to have this part really stiff, after adding your fusible interfacing, which is that black one that I added, I fused to the main fabric and to the lining fabric, you want to add a fusible wadding. You can use a thick wadding, you can use a medium thick wadding. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell so you get updates when we post new videos. And I'm going to be seeing you in my next tutorial. Bye.